Hello and welcome to my channel, where I'll be telling you all kinds of strange stories ranging from true crime to some much less believable, although just as fascinating, tales. For today's video we have the story of murdering mother Diane Downs. Listen in and see what you think. The 19th of May 1983 was a miserable night. It was raining, and the hospital in Springfield, Oregon, was busy with car accident victims and domestic dispute casualties. When Diane Downs drove herself and her 3 children to the emergency room, she was not there because of a car accident. She was not there because she had been abused. She was there because she claimed she had been shot by a bushy-haired stranger who had attempted to take her vehicle on a deserted road that wet evening. This was the first thing she said, coolly, calmly, and with few emotions on display. Unless you know better, this might be considered perfectly fine. After all, after a traumatic event, people react differently. Some will be calm despite what happened. Yet when you consider that Downs said this man also shot her 3 children, Christy, 8, Cheryl, 7, and Danny, 3, you might wonder how a mother could stay so collected. How was she not screaming the place down, demanding help, begging for someone, anyone, to see to her little ones and forget about her own injury altogether? Downs was, so witnesses said, more concerned with her own injuries than anything else, and was certainly not behaving in the way that a distraught mother, whose children had been shot by a total stranger on a wet and windy deserted road, would be expected to. Sadly, Cheryl died shortly after getting to the hospital, while the other 2 children clung on terribly injured and fighting for their lives. Thankfully, Christy and Danny would survive their ordeal, but it took months of physical and emotional care to help them. Danny was paralysed from the waist down, and Christy had suffered a disabling stroke. Of course, the story that Diane Downs told was not the true story. What is believed to have happened is so much worse, and paints Diane Downs as one of the most callous killers in history. It all started to unravel fairly quickly for Downs. She just seemed to be too calm for someone who had just been through something so devastating, and her narrative changed as she was questioned by detectives. There were also physical indications that something was wrong with the mother's story. For example, investigators said that there was no blood spatter on the inside or outside of the driver's side of the car, calling Downs' story into question. How could a man with a gun have shot her children through the car window, which is what she claimed happened, and yet somehow managed not to get any blood on anything at all? It just didn't add up. All that could be said for sure was that here was a mother who was totally unconcerned with the well-being of her children. She was simply emotionally lifeless and acting as though distracted by something, as though her children's lives meant nothing to her. In the end, Diane Downs was ultimately apprehended and prosecuted with murder and attempted murder. According to investigators, she wanted to get rid of her children so she could be with her boyfriend, so she shot them and then herself in the arm, and concocted a feeble story about some bushy-haired man who didn't exist. It didn't take long for her to be convicted in 1984 and condemned to life in prison, where she is still incarcerated today. Despite all of this, Downs claims she did not do anything. Let's dig deeper into this story and find out more about the murdering mother, Diane Downs. Elizabeth Diane Fredrickson, known as Diane, was born on the 7th of August 1955, and had always wanted to be a mother. Or at least, that's what she told people. She married Steve Downs in 1973 when she was just 17 years old, and the pair had 2 daughters, Christy and Cheryl. Diane said that when she initially informed Steve she was pregnant with Christy, he was disappointed. Apparently, this is because although they had talked about having children, they hadn't agreed to start trying just yet. She had decided she didn't want to wait and stopped using protection, falling pregnant quickly afterwards. Yet, over the years, Steve mellowed. He loved his daughters, and he hated the way Diane treated them. He said she was verbally abusive, rude, arrogant, always telling them what to do, and that nothing was ever good enough for her. Their marriage was becoming more and more rocky, and when Downs informed Steve that she was pregnant again, this time with Danny, and that he wasn't the father, Steve left. Diane, who worked as a letter carrier at the local post office, had started an intimate relationship with her married former co-worker, Robert Knickerbocker, after she and Steve divorced. Whether she had been seeing him before her marriage ended and whether or not he was Danny's real father, Downs has never said. Knickerbocker, who lived with his wife in Arizona where Diane was born, didn't like children, according to Diane, and she had 3 of them. Prosecutors said that Diane attempted to get rid of her own children in order to be with Knickerbocker. According to the investigation, Diane grew absolutely obsessed with Knickerbocker. Every day she would send him notes, but they would return unread. Knickerbocker said Diane was stalking him after he informed her he was leaving his wife and moving to Oregon, even threatening to kill his wife. He was done with the relationship at this point, but Diane just couldn't let it go. So much so that Knickerbocker was the first person she called when she was at the hospital with her children. Something else that seemed incredibly suspicious. Diane became more of a suspect in her children's shootings when detectives discovered about her connection with Knickerbocker. Meanwhile, Diane continued to give interviews about what had occurred, always denying any involvement. She was becoming quite the celebrity, the grieving mother who had gone through so much, even being injured in the process. The problem is, the more she spoke, and she talked a lot and often, the more things didn't make any sense. It was as if she believed if she spoke long enough, perhaps her story would start to become more believable.
Everybody says you sure were lucky. Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful. The scar is going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky.
No proof supporting Diane's claim was discovered. What was discovered, however, was Diane's possession of a .22 caliber handgun, the identical weapon used to shoot the children. According to detectives, Diane's ex-husband, Steve, and Knickerbocker both informed police that she possessed the gun, which Diane did not reveal to them when asked. Diane was arrested in February 1984. By this time she was pregnant with another man's baby, not Steve's or Knickerbocker's. The infant was subsequently placed for adoption. It's thought she got pregnant on purpose because she knew that if she was, people would look at her and ask how could a lady who loves children so much and become pregnant again have murdered her own children. Diane, on the other hand, disagreed with this. She says she became pregnant because she missed Christy, Danny, and Cheryl so much. She said,
I got pregnant because I miss Christy, and I miss Danny, and I miss Cheryl so much. I'm never going to see Cheryl on earth again. And you can't replace children, but you can replace the effect that they give you. And they give me love, they give me satisfaction, they give me stability, they give me a reason to live and a reason to be happy, and that's gone. They took it from me. But Children are so easy to conceive.
Although some took this statement at face value, others were shocked. This was a woman who clearly held no regard for a child's life, only wanting them around to give her pleasure and love. When that usefulness was over, they could be discarded, replaced like they were nothing. And those interviews that she gave didn't help her cause either. Laughing, joking, even when reliving the crime and going to the place it had happened, it was a strange sight to behold.
There, I got in the car, jumped in, put the keys in. I just hit my cast. Started the car and left. The car door shut itself.
If anyone had been on her side, her reaction in front of the camera should have been enough to convince them something was terribly wrong. It was the evidence of Diane's own daughter, however, that sealed the case against her. Christy, who survived the shooting, was the prosecution's only eyewitness, since her brother had been asleep at the time of the shooting and her other sibling was killed. Because of the stroke she suffered, it took a long time before she was able to speak and tell her story, but once she did, it was explosive. Christy stated in court that her mother had murdered her sister and injured her and her brother, intending to kill them all. She said that her mother pulled over, went to the trunk, took something out and then shot her and her siblings. Authorities think Diane then shot herself in the arm. Downs was convicted on all charges on the 17th of June 1984 and sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years. She was required to serve 25 years before being considered for parole, and the judge made it clear that he did not intend for Downs to ever be free again. Downs' two surviving children eventually went to live with the lead prosecutor on the case. He and his wife, Joanne, adopted them in 1986. The story doesn't quite end there. Downs escaped from jail 3 years after being imprisoned by climbing a barbed wire fence and fleeing. She says she was on the lookout for that mysterious bushy-haired stranger. She was discovered inside the house of another cellmate's spouse 11 days later. Diane is still in jail today and still maintains her innocence.
The state says that I was the one that shot them and that I wanted them dead. If that was the case, I would not have taken them to the hospital still crying. There are so many other ways to accomplish such a horrific deed if I was going to do it. I'm certainly bright enough to figure out another way besides some way that looks so absolutely insane and hokey that nobody would believe it. I'm not dumb.
Thank you so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed the content, click the subscribe and like button so you can receive more content like this strange story every week. See you next time.